All right.
Awesome. All right, we're going. So because I'm recording it, Doug, I know you well because you and I have been working together now for six weeks. Oh my gosh, 6 weeks on a course together. But just real quick, talk to everybody real fast about where you are in your author journey.
A couple, I've been doing software for a long time. About every 7 to 10 years, I kind of shift what I do. And a few years ago, it was kind of like, what do I want to do for my retirement years? And so I decided to start taking some classes and writing. I've always loved telling stories. Grandkids, kids when they're here and grown up, grandkids. Never really wrote them down. So a couple years ago, started taking some courses. Been working through various and sundry things. That path has led me to your class and your work, and it's helped a lot. So
yeah, well,
yeah.
I love having you in the class because you're really good, especially for somebody who's just kind of kicking off. And it's fun to read your work. Okay, so you sent me a piece, and we're going to talk through it. I have 5 things I want to talk about. 8 things I want to talk about. I have 8 things I want to talk about. 3 that I really loved, and 5 that I kind of want to work on with you. Okay. Is there anything specifically you want to get to?
No, I honestly am just trying to get better at all this. To be honest, I wrote this story. I think I finished it almost a year ago, first draft.
Wow.
Worked through a couple and put it aside and started working on other ones. Part of a grander plan. Didn't publish it, not because I was afraid to, just because I'm a different objective for a set of things. So then I've reworked it a little bit, and then coming to this class, it's like, one of the things I remember hearing somebody's podcast, reading a book, who knows, probably both. The first chapter is very important, right? And I get that. I like the story as it was. I was perfectly happy with it where I am in my journey. I knew it could be better, and I figured, hey, since I'm still not publishing it yet, I might as well take the opportunity to make it better. So the scene I sent you is the opening scene in the first story of what hopefully will be a series. I think going through the process that you had us do in the class really amped it up a lot. So I think it's better than it was. Still, I mean, it still needs things, but it is
nice. You never want to hear I took the class and the scene is worse. You don't want to hear that. No. That would suck.
No, I really think it's much. It wasn't bad before. I mean, but it's much more engaging now, I think.
Awesome.
And again, I'd like to make it even better. So
very cool. So let's first do what I think you're doing really well.
Okay.
Because I think I know when I talk about my work, I learn as much from like people saying what they like about it than where people like give me notes on it. So I'm going to share the screen so we're both looking at the same thing. Okay. So what's going really well? The first thing I really loved is your character voices really stand out, which is great. So it's a short piece, right? Like we're talking 6 pages. And so I haven't done the word count, but probably 25 to 3,000 words. And in that time, you get a big cast across and kind of like set up their relational tensions really, really well. I was really impressed by it. So, right. And the way you do that is with each opening statement. So like something you're doing really well is the opening statements of every character are very defining of who they are. And that's really important. Like, we think about meeting characters for the first time as like having a first impression of somebody. And so this like what you're doing here with this first impression is really great because it really lays them out. So let me give an example of one that I really, really liked. Yeah, this is one I really liked. So you start the piece off with this group of students. This is science fiction, and they're touring this like garden. I meant to ask you, are they on another planet? Are they on?
They're on it's a space settlement near Earth orbit kind of idea.
Gotcha.
So it's supposed to be, not way out there sci-fi stuff, doable with what we think we know how to do, kind of stuff. That
Gotcha.
kind of sci-fi. So
yeah, well, the scene is painted beautifully. They're on this tour. They're walking through this floating garden. They're floating through this floating garden, and it's like a group of I assumed high school students. With
probably middle school. Yeah.
middle school.
I
Yeah,
mean,
middle school
yeah,
works too.
yeah,
Just like that teenage,
yeah.
punk ass age. That, that teenage, those teenage years. You do a really
Yeah.
great job of capturing their voice, by the way, which is what I'm trying to get to. That you did great with this. And so you've got Bobby is the hunky teacher who's like leading them through, and your main character, um, Taya. Am I saying her name right? Taya.
Oh, that's how I would say it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so bad. I'm so bad with names.
Yeah.
So you've got this great opening exchange here. Bobby stopped and turned his back to the students. Taya saw why Sashi had a crush on him. His broad smile melted away troubles, chasing any questions and doubts. And when he looked at you, his deep brown eyes drew you in like a magnet. For a moment, there was no one else besides you and Bobby. So you've got that great, like, teenage girl kind of crushing on hot older teacher. And Sashi had asked Bobby a question, and Sashi replies right away, that wasn't the main reason. My research with your mother is important. Oh, sorry. They asked Sashi asked Bobby, the hot teacher, a question, and Bobby replies, that wasn't my main reason. My research with your mother is important. That's why the university sent me. But yes, gardens were definitely a bonus. So the reason I love this so much is because in that little paragraph, you establish your two of your main characters, Taya, I'm going to screw up her name all day, so I'm just going to call her T. T and Sashi are teenage girls who have like all the normal teenage girl emotions and things, even though they're in this like floating garden. And their teacher is, the typical like hot teacher, even though he's floating through a garden teaching them about things. And then with one sentence, you identify that Sashi's mother built the garden, that it's a research garden, that's super important, and that he loves it, right? Like, so like that dude, one paragraph, and you got three characters in. And like totally communicated who they were, and like totally had us connect with them. It was really great. I was really impressed. And then
Thank you.
You do it down here again with T's brother and his friend Vic, right? So T glanced behind her and saw her brother Brock and his friend Victor. They had moved away from the group, waiting behind the students following Bobby. They were talking about something quietly, so she moved near to hear what her brother was up to. So this is like, I loved this so much because we're like less than half a page in, you're pulling in more characters, which is fantastic. And it's such a like big sister, like motherly sister vibe. And the whole like brother and friend like conspiring is great. So like you're taking these really like great tropes of relationships and just like giving them to us so quickly, but in a very relatable way, which is great. And then you pull it right in here into dialogue. Vic, it would be cool. T pulled herself next to her brother. Brock, no. Victor laughed a little and shook his head. Right? Like, so already we get the like, brother and friend conspiring, and T like jumping in, interrupting their conversation, like doesn't even know what they're going to do, but already she's like, no, like it was really nice. And then you bring another student in, Allison, who kind of seems to have a crush on Brock, I'm assuming. It definitely sides with Brock and Vic over T. Yeah, so the whole dynamic, the way you pull the characters in, the way you introduce them, and like getting their relationships out front, like right away, so there's not a mystery to the reader as to who these people are and like where they fall in like the social strata of the piece. You did a really great job with that, man. I was really impressed.
Well, I have to confess that, I mean, this is not the version I put up. Laura actually gave me a few tweaks in the
Nice.
class.
That's great.
So like, I mean, it's not radically different, but she did help, so that was helpful. So
yeah, I think it's awesome. Well, I really liked it. You did a great job with it. Okay, Second thing I love, introduction of the characters, how all their voices are different. We've talked about that, which, well, not fully about that, but like T has this very like, just looking at T's statements, right? Like, the first thing she says, sorry, my own edits get in my way. I can never tell what is there and what is not there.
First thing was when she talked to Seshi. Yeah.
Yeah. She says, I think they're nice too, but I didn't think you cared much about plants. Right, like teasing her friend. So we already know that she's going to make this like she's somebody who connects with others, right? Like she takes the initiative to come and tease her friend. We've got Brock, no, right? Like, so we know that's the second thing she says. So we know that, like, again, inserting herself into a conversation that wasn't happening, this time to correct her brother. No, Brock, no way, nope, right? Like, which is such a great like big sister thing. I don't know if you ever watched Phineas and Ferb, but she's like, that's the only reason I know is because I have young kids. But that's it's a cartoon about two brothers who are constantly going on summer vacations, and they have an older sister, and her goal is to bust them on their. This has a very like older sister vibe from that, which is great. And then she continues to scold, you heard Bobby, besides this is one of Uncle Mac's favorite spots in the entire settlement. What would you think if you caught you horsing around here, right? Like, so we're through 4 pieces in, and we already have this like strong friendship to her peers. She's a friend, and she's kind of cool and fun, teasing them about things in a way that they appreciate, right? Because Sashi responds positively. And then with her brother, she's kind of the like, older sister rule follower. You have to listen to me, type guy. And then as we go down, she keeps talking, and finally she's going to agree to this capture the flag game, which goes back to like the fun. So that's T. And then if we get Brock, like, just to contrast with another voice, he gives his first thing is what, right? Like, which is such a great like younger brother, like, Brock, no, what? And then
To be honest, I have 4 kids. They're all grown and married now, but my oldest daughter and my oldest son are pretty close in age, and there was a lot of that.
Yeah, so you've heard this over and over and over again. Yeah, so anyway, it's just a great like opening, and just that like Brock never really gets more than a couple words at a time, which is perfect, right? Like, it's just a perfect contrast from the talkative sister who appears, giving us full sentences, to moving to these two boys like, Vic, what would be cool? Victor laughs, what? Like, just giving him that like, Brock had an idea. Allison says, I want to hear it. No, you don't. She says, what was it, Brock? What if we came back and capture the flag in here? Is another Brock. Come on, not you too, Brock said. So, right, we've got that like defensive tone to him, that like plotting and scheming tone to him. Just to contrast him with his older sister, that like, her desire to follow the rules and his desire to like come up with a grand scheme is just a really beautiful contrast in voices. So, and I felt like all 5 characters stood out on their own. I felt like I could read it and, for the most part, get a feel for who was talking,
Well, cool.
without even having to think very much, which was really great. I really loved that. Yeah. Okay. Third thing I really loved, that I thought you did really well. As the piece moves on, they get into a capture the flag game, and it goes straight action, right? Like, so, which is great, because Allison and T are trying to catch a flag, and Allison goes off, and T's kind of watching her, and T's thinking about how she could slip by Brock. And it would be super easy to have these last, 2 pages just be almost solid action. And the problem with that is that you lose, like, the readers start to skim when we don't have the emotional connection of dialogue or thought, one or the other. Readers will start to skim the piece, and we lose them in that.
Well, to be honest, the version before I rewrote this for this class was pretty much that.
Oh, really?
And Yeah, so I mean, it was a lot of action. What I decided to do was, okay, I didn't look at the original scene. I did the dialogue only first, and like you said, and filled in the rest later based on, just vaguely what was going on in the original. It's like, okay, well, they're playing this game, and I know kind of how they're interacting, so I, redid it all from without looking at anything, but based on what you were teaching us. And
Awesome.
again, to be honest, if nothing else, the rewriting this scene makes the whole class worthwhile to me. So,
Thanks, man.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna fight my need to self-deprecate and just say thank you.
yeah,
So, how do you like? How do you feel about the two versions? The one that was all action, and then the one now that has this interspersed thoughts.
well, this one moves. I mean, this one has moves along just as much, and it's just as active. It didn't diminish the action at all.
Yeah,
It kind of gave it some connective tissue, some vibrancy to it that wasn't there before.
yeah. My hope is I felt like there's a lot of energy in it. Like there's a lot of
Hmm.
moving. You had originally in here, just to explain anybody who's watching this on video, you had originally in here these in between action scenes, these statements, you had them as inner thoughts. So you had them in
Hmm.
italics, like, uh-oh, he's heading this way. Oh, please keep moving. Allison, at least she's doing something right this time. Can't you do what you're supposed to do once? I think that's really great. Like, I really like the way you're spacing out these blocks of action with T's like thinking about what's happening really like pulls that emotional energy in. My preference is just to put it in her mouth. And again, this is just style. This isn't like a hard and fast rule or anything. But whenever I have a character talking in between action scenes like this, I have them just mutter to themselves, like whisper to themselves, that kind of like self-talk that we do. Part of the reason is that for me, there's something about hearing it out loud as opposed to going inside a character's head that keeps it more like present, right? Like I feel like if I go inside a character's head, I don't know, when I'm reading that it becomes kind of esoteric, but
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah,
To be honest, I don't have a strong preference one way or the other. I just, I've read plenty of books where they do it like this, and I go,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's kind of what your first choice. It's like, okay, I'll just, she's by herself, but I can see what you're saying, and I will. I'm sure I'll make those changes.
yeah,
'Cause I do like them better.
yeah, it gets weird when like, especially, and I don't know if you'll do this in this book, but books that switch perspective, that inner monologue can get tough because I'm always like, wait, whose inner monologue am I reading now? So that kind of like
Yeah, it's
the Percy Jackson novels do this. They
yeah.
have that like inner monologue that's in italics, and they
Hmm.
keep switching character. Every chapter is told by a different character, and I'm always like, so much thinking. Can we just like
Yeah,
talk and not think?
yeah.
But that's
I mean,
just
that's a good point because most of the chapters are her, probably, but only maybe two-thirds. About half the rest are split between somebody who isn't introduced yet, the victim, one of the, and
okay.
her brother.
Oh,
So
nice.
there is a, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. That's just me being finicky.
No.
But I loved how you kept the piece moving with, and you have this nice pattern of like paragraph or two paragraphs, her thought, paragraph or two paragraphs, her thought, paragraph or two paragraphs, her thought. It really has a nice pace to it. Um, you did that really well.
Thank you.
Okay, a few things that I would recommend you work on.
Okay.
Um, in a big cast scene, so like scenes with three or more speakers, you've got to put the dialogue tag in to say who's talking. You don't have to put it in every single time, but you have to put it in whenever the dialogue changes from two people to the third person's insertion. Um, because we just, we want our writing to be accessible to a reader. So we want to remove as many barriers to their engagement as possible. And one of the barriers to engagement is like, wait, who in the world is talking? Right? Like we don't,
Yeah.
and your voices are strong enough that you can pull it off. But the problem, I think, I was having when I read it is that Vic and Brock are very close in voice.
Yeah.
So I couldn't, when I was reading this section here specifically, I couldn't tell if it was Vic or if it was Brock. And then you have Allison and T all talking at the same time. So you've got 4 people in a conversation, which is fantastic. And it moves really quick and it's really nice. I would just add those pieces in that let us know who it is. So like here, for example, T opened her mouth and tried to think of something to say, but when she hesitated, Allison chimed in. Come on, Vic. Uh, Lighten up, sis. Just think, capture the flag in 0G. So I added the sis there because by adding the sis, we know it's Brock,
Hmm.
right? Like, but just putting that little tell in there of like, hey, this is who this is. And you actually had it at the beginning. I didn't add the sis in there. Adding the sis in there is good. Well, so we know it's T because she's the one being talked to. We can't set boundaries around the club's, we can set boundaries around the club's plants. Originally, you didn't tell me who that was. That could either be Vic, Brock, or Allison. All 3 of
Yeah.
them are defending that perspective. I don't know. So we just want to throw in Allison offered there, right? Like, so we don't need it here because, well, you have it here. Allison chimed in. So we know it's Allison talking here. You have it here because we use the phrase sis. So we know that's Brock. The well is responding directly to what Brock said. So we don't need it there. But now we need it because we've moved away from Brock and T. And now we need to know who's talking. Is
Okay.
Allison talking? Right? Like now you have it here. Victor shrugged his shoulders. I guess they are on their in their own section. CSS, it'll work, Brock said. So I put it there because we switched from Victor to Brock. You don't technically need it because you have the sys. But I felt like it wasn't hurting anything. She says, I'll think about it. All right. I'm assuming that's Brock.
Yeah, that would be Brock.
Yeah, because it's that back and forth. I
Yeah.
didn't say yes, right? Like we're going to assume that's T because it's now we're in this back and forth of Brock and T. Sure. But think about it. Okay. Brock turned and winked at Victor before pulling himself along the vines. He had won this battle. So just adding a couple like, hey, this is who's talking, I feel like makes this big cast conversation a little easier to follow. Doesn't give you a lot of words and just removes that potential barrier from readers of getting lost in the talk. Again, though, it's a minor thing because your dialogue's really good. Uh, but yeah, so that was the first thing I saw. Any questions about that?
No, I mean, it makes sense. I think I was probably trying to go pretty minimal, probably overdid it.
No, I don't think you overdid it. I think big cast scenes are really tricky.
Okay.
They're really hard to write, right? Like it, dialogue between 2 people. So down here, later on the piece, you have a conversation between Allison and T. Am I there yet? Yeah, I am. So
Yeah,
yeah, those clematis vines are off limits. I won't tell if you don't. No, besides you'll get caught. Again, whatever. Tia pointed her thumb over her shoulder. Go back through the mesa boxes, right? Like I can tell who's talking because it's just 2 of them and I have the advantage of like every time a new line starts, I know they've passed the
okay.
ball back and forth.
Hmm.
So we don't need it here, right? Like this reads really smooth without those tags. But when you get into this like 4 or 5 people talking, it just gets so
No, I get, yeah. Yeah, I
yeah,
get that.
especially what I love about the dialogue you have here is it's so fast paced, right? Like it's just popping, 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 and you just fly through reading it. Um, so not hindering it with that little barrier, I think is going to be good.
Cool.
Okay, second thing is emotional build in the conversations. So I want you, and I think the clearest, you did it a couple times. I think the clearest example of it was up here. So T wanders over to hear Brock and Victor conspiring. And Brock says, Vic, you know what would be cool? T pulled herself up next to her brother. Brock, no. Right? Like, so we've got this hard opening with an exclamation point. Victor laughed and shook his head a little bit. So I would, and then we have what? Capture the flag in 0G. No, Brock, no way, nope. Right? Like, so T is coming in strong with the first Brock no. So if we think about like her level of emotion, she enters the conversation up here.
Okay. Yeah.
And once you get her up here, she's got nowhere to go.
Okay.
Right? Like, so she just has to stay there. So I would recommend like thinking about like what her emotional arc is in the conversation, and I'd have her sneak into the conversation where he says like, Vic, you know what would be cool? T pulled herself up to her brother and says like, what are you two talking about? Right? Like, you can still have her be forceful, but you don't have to have her up here. Right? Like, so
Okay.
we give her some place to go, and it ramps up the energy of the conversation. Right? Like,
Okay.
as she ramps up, the reader will ramp up as well. And I would probably even back her down here too a little bit.
Okay.
Brock, no way, Brock. Nope. Like, I would pull that back a little bit and just keep the no way. Right? Maybe give Brock like one more, like, it's going to be so cool. And then have her say like, absolutely not. Or like, no way, Brock. Like, get that like triad of build where she sneaks in and then she kind of builds into it.
Okay.
Would be a nice emotional flow. But I think, I'm really nitpicking.
No, that's, to be honest, that's what I want. I mean, that's one of the things you don't often get on, any online course or that kind of stuff is useful, practical, tactical feedback kinds of stuff. And this is great. So,
Well, and so here it's just fun, right? Like, but where this thinking about how the emotional flow of a character's dialogue in a piece is really going to pay off, because this is a thriller, is when you've got a kidnap victim, right? Like, and they're talking to their kidnapper, let's say, like, just speculating. And, the kidnapper, you want to build the kidnapper to anger, right? Like, so you want the kidnap victim to be like, can I have another glass of water? You don't want the kidnapper to come off right away and be like, just shut up. You're not getting anything. Right? Like,
okay.
we want to
Yeah.
build those scenes. So like this scene, it's just fun. But when you want the real climactic payoff and the like emotional connection of the reader with the moment, when the moment gets really intense and you need the reader like feeling what's happening, that's when like writing this smooth emotional build is going to be really important, because it's then that the like emotional build is really going to pay off for you, because the reader will fully engage in that moment with your character. So if you can nail it in small scenes like this one, you'll nail it in the really emotionally intense scenes that that you really need the reader invested in. Yeah, going back to the Percy Jackson series, which I think is on my mind because the age range is the same, and the general like otherworldly in a realistic setting is the same. In the first book, the emotional arcs are off. And so like there's a scene I remember specifically in the opening of the book where they're running from the Minotaur.
Okay.
And Percy and his like guide, whose name I can't remember, who's a fawn, they're joking in the middle of the scene. And it completely erases the emotional arc of the scene, because what we want is this big intense build to this moment where Percy has to like abandon his mother and his mother disappears. And because they're joking a little bit as it's going on, we lose that emotional connection, right? Like the emotional flow is off. So we just want to make sure we know where we want our characters to go in the scene, and we're building to that place appropriately and not distracting from it with anything that might be out of the emotional context of the scene. So like in this little scene, and then a couple more in here, that build that I know I noted, it won't necessarily matter, because you're like, you know what, so what if T comes in hot on her brother, like who cares? But when we get into like the real intense scenes where like there's action happening or the stakes are higher, that understanding how to build that emotional flow is super important, because that's when we just like want to grab that reader and hold on to them. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, makes good sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. The other one is to keep it moving. Let me see if I can find a place here where. So you had a couple places. Here we go. You had a couple of places where you had not long, but you had like 3 or 4 sentence paragraphs. What's really great,
longer for the scene. Yeah.
longer for the scene. Yeah, not long at all, right? Like not seriously in like a real in a different scene, not long. But you've got this big cast scene and everybody's speaking in half sentences, right? Like, which is great because A, it's very authentic to teenagers, and B, it really keeps the scene moving, right? Like nobody's monologuing. We're just passing that ball. If we think of it as like a game of hot potato, we're just throwing that hot potato all over the circle, right? And then we come to a moment like this, and you would have this: Allison turned away from T and faced Brock. What if we came and played capture the flag here? Victor slowly shook his head. I don't know. There's stuff missing here. Anyway, I don't know. Bobby had a point. My mother's club tried a few months ago to grow these flowers from seed, right? Like, so I want to take that 3 sentences where all of a sudden the characters are talking longer, and I just want to insert some of those shorter, quick sentences to keep that pace moving while you're delivering this information, right? Like, so Allison turned and faced Brock. What is it, Brock? Right? Like, just give her a word. What if we played capture the flag when we came back? Keep the victor. I don't know. Bobby had a point. Come on, not you too, Brock said. It's just my mother tried to grow these seeds for months, right? Like, then have him come back to it. Great. Be lame like her, Brock said, motioning to T. They gave up. So it's just adding those like 3 little bits in there. Those quick, short sentences blend this part where Victor's like talking about what's happening, talking about giving this information the reader needs to have, makes it more digestible, like makes it not digestible, makes it blend into the scene more, right? Like keeping that ball passing back and forth. And so in these big cast scenes, especially ones that are antagonistic, where people are arguing like this one, or ones that are building intensity, right? Like scenes that are intense. You want short, quick phrases like, let's say they're running away from the kidnapper, right? And they're like trying to figure out what to do next. Short, half sentences, like a quick, fast, like, I don't know what to do. Let's go this way. No, that way won't work. Why don't we try going this way, right? Like, we want to keep it quick because the quick motion of the dialogue builds that intensity. And when we need to deliver information in this long sentence, we want to break the sentence up with other characters interrupting so that we can keep that intensity moving. Or in this case, in the antagonistic thing, so we can keep the energy around the debate moving, right? Like, yeah, just keep it going. Again, dude, I'm being super nitpicky. The piece is really good, but
no, it doesn't bother me a bit. Keep going.
Yeah, just to say that, like, chopping in there, letting the rest, putting your big cast to work to like cut into the scene, to cut into larger pieces, will really help to keep it moving. Okay, so we talked about going someplace. We talked about big cast scenes. So the last thing, using names. There were I'm not going to look for it because it's something we can just talk about. There were several places in the scene where you had a character use the name of another character.
Okay.
Like, come on, Brock, right? Like T saying like, come on, Brock, or Allison saying like, T, you're always blah, 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 blah. Whenever we use a name in a sentence, we're intensifying the intention of the sentence. So if I said, I'm really excited to talk to you about this piece you wrote, versus Doug, I'm really excited to talk to you about this piece you wrote, right? Like
Yeah.
you can feel how using that name like pops that sentence out a little bit more. So when using a name in a sentence, just be sure you want that sentence intensified because it creates a pause for the reader's mind that is like, oh, this is really important, right? Like they're dropping that name because this is a big deal. So like a place where I thought you used it really well that we've already read is this: see sis, it'll work, right? Like he's
Okay.
making a point. See, it'll work. See, sis, it'll work, right? Like he's directing it specifically at her. He's making a point. He's intensifying to the whole group that like she's the outlier. So I'm going to
Yeah.
point to her and say, see you, this will work, right? Like, so that's an appropriate place to use it where it works well. I would just say making sure that like whenever you're using it to intensify.
Intentionally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
intentionally. We don't just want to throw it in there all the time. And it's super tempting in a big cast scene because you're trying not to say Brock said, T said,
Yeah.
Allison said. So it's super,
Basically, yeah.
yeah, so it's super like tempting to be like, see Brock? Oh, I get it, Allison. All
Yeah.
right, that's enough T, right? Like so
Yeah.
it's to pass that ball back and forth. But yeah, we just that's the balance we need to strike in these big cast scenes is not.
No, I never thought. Yeah, I never thought about the intensity. That makes a lot of sense. So,
Yeah. Um, all right, man, that's all I had. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
uh, no, I mean it's the idea. The One of the key relationships is Ty and Brock. You know, he tends to, you know, in the story he's going to be. They're both smart, but he's going to be smarter. You know, clever kind of
Hmm.
smart, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, he's always got these ideas, and she's always, you know, and to be honest, he can talk her into things eventually, and that gets her into trouble. That's part of the storyline. So I wanted to introduce that early.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
nail it early because he definitely
yeah,
talks her into getting into
you know,
trouble.
and that's and well, he talks her into something that turns out to be, you know, she causes the problem for her new friend, which
Yeah.
causes, you know, the whole story to happen. So yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm
and
glad they came across.
they did come across, and there's some the like what's nice about having distinct character personalities like you do. I'm gonna stop sharing this so I can actually like see your face because otherwise all I see is like a little box of you. What's nice about having big cast personalities like you do is that um, like distinct personalities like you've written is that the play off of them will almost write itself, right? Like so
Okay.
with the mothering older sister and the clever but mischievous younger brother, you can see that there's already like trust problems built in there,
Mhm.
right? Like, so even when he's being productive with his solutions, she's going to mistrust them and she's going to try to instruct him and mother him. And like, you can see that like when he wants to take a risk, even if it's for the positive, she's going to want to keep him from taking that risk. Right. Like, and he's going to have to push against her mothering a little bit to prove that he is like capable of doing these things on his own, right? Like you can almost see the character dynamics in the story start to write themselves in these moments of intensity, which is, you know, a kind of wonderful byproduct of having these characters that stand out, right? Like you can see Allison always in conflict with T because she wants to earn Brock's approval. But then that creating conflict between Brock and Allison because Brock at times is going to want to agree with his sister, right? Like so, and then Allison feeling off center and off base because she doesn't know when to agree with T and when not to agree with T, right? Like so, that like those kind of like when you get those unique character personalities, those kind of interactions can bring a lot of really great texture to the piece,
Mhm.
and provide you as the writer all these opportunities to like work these characters off of each other. Even the thing with like Sashi and T, where Sashi is like trying to get the attention of the teacher, and she plays there as a little more popular girl, kind of like, trying to get spotlight on her, whereas T doesn't ever really do that. You can see even that dynamic playing out, where like Sashi's going to get embarrassed if T embarrasses her publicly when T is just trying to be a friend and doesn't know, right? Like, so all the dynamics you have going are really good. Then you have the like sidekick friend with Brock and Vic, who's like who you can see like enjoys being Brock's partner, but the question is like, when does Vic get his own agency?
Yeah.
And that's always a struggle for a sidekick character, is the like, I don't always just want to agree with my buddy, right? Like, so you can have some strategic moments where they disagree.
Yeah, he's kind of Brock's foil.
Yeah.
Or trying to be anyway. So
yeah, and it totally can. That's a great thing to set up early in chapters, because right at that strategic moment where, the risk of the story, the like moment where everything needs to come together to work, that's when you take these character dynamics you've been playing with and you just take one and twist it. And like, it just drives the plot in a great way.
I actually had in the story I finished last spring, there was a prologue chapter that I cut completely because it didn't have this cast in it. It was the girl that ends up getting kidnapped and her mother. It's kind of the backstory. And it's one of those kill your darlings. And as we're going through the thinking through it and going through the class and talking about making sure we kind of dive in right away into who the story is really, or driving the story. Well, that kind of, it was the wrong direction to go. So
that's a hard decision to make.
Yeah, I really liked it too, but I'll probably do something with it later. I don't know what I'll do with it. So.
Yeah, can you work it in somewhere else?
It doesn't really fit here. I may do it as like the intent of this whole series is I'm going to do a podcast where I read these out loud.
Nice.
Kind of do a weekly. It's supposed to be middle grade, so I was going to just record it, once or twice a week. And part of my delay in doing all this is I want to get a few stories done in the can where I like them, recorded, and some more in the process, mostly so I can know what pace I can keep up as finding out, deciding ahead of time what pace you want, and then finding out what that pace is really like.
Yeah.
Is they're different.
Yeah. And radically different.
Yeah. And so that's been my only real reason to delay. And but it worked out because now the story will be a lot better, having reworked it.
Yeah. Just knowing that you're writing this for audio, those dialogue tags in a big cast scene are 10 times more important now.
Okay.
Especially if you're the only one reading.
Yeah. I'm gonna say I'm gonna give it away, and so I'm not gonna, I will, I'm paying to get it edited and all those kinds of things, but there's no way I can pay to get it recorded or anything.
Yeah, and writing it to record it, you'd almost have to write it as a screenplay, and I don't think you want to do that, because you have real talent in setting a scene quickly and setting like emotional dynamics quickly. I wouldn't want to lose that in a screenplay, which can be hard. But that being said, like, what you lose in audio that you have going for you right now in this big cast scene is that the reader has the visual cue when someone stops talking and someone else starts. So when you go audio, you almost need to, like, what I always think of is like Law and Ordering it. Have we talked about that?
Yeah, I've heard you mention that.
Okay. Yeah.
Somebody gets up and moves across the room or whatever.
Yeah. Every time somebody new talks, you give them emotion before they speak, so that the character knows that who's talking, so that the observer / reader knows who's about to start talking. They do it for a different reason in TV than we do it for in print, but that's one way. You do a lot of it already, right? Like, I'm just glancing up and it's like, Victor slowly shook his head. I don't know, Bobby had a point. Come on, not you too, Brock said. So like giving that, like, Victor slowly shook his head, and then contrasting that with just like Brock said, can give you the variety you want and still continue to cue the reader off, the listener, one of those, the listener, whoever that person is, the listener off to like who's talking, right? Like, so as you move to audio, like as you write the rest of these scenes in audio, as you write the rest of these scenes, I'd really be thinking about that audio piece.
Okay. That's
and like how and when you give it to somebody to edit, make sure they know.
Okay.
Because I know a lot of times I'll get artful with stuff I'm editing because like I like the visual of it.
Okay.
And whereas if I'm editing for audio, I'll change how I write it, how I edit, to make sure that it's like clarity is way more important. So yeah, anyway, just to
I mean, I'm going to publish him his books. I just, maybe I'm shooting at 2 targets and won't hit either one of them. I don't know.
No, I think it's really smart. I think it's a good idea to do audio and book. I think it's great, especially if you gave the first one away for free, like ran a 50-week, if you've got chapters, if you ran a 1-year chapter, sorry, a 1-year podcast where you're giving a chapter away for free each week, audio wise, even running it with a blog too. And while you are putting those out, prepping the second book to be sold, so that as soon as the first one ends, you can sell the second one. Like that would be a great, I think that would be a really smart marketing plan. It feels smart to me. I don't remember the name of the author, but there was an author who wrote this book called Worm that was, or maybe it was she wrote this book called Worm. I don't remember. But it was just a blog, just putting it up for free. And I remember several of my friends were reading it and they were like obsessed with
waiting for the next one.
As soon as the book drops, I'm buying the book. And even though they read the blog all the way through, when the book dropped, they all went and bought the book because they really wanted the experience of having the full book and not having to like skip from one blog post to the next. So it's a strategy that works. I think if you can pull it off, it's awesome.
So we'll see. Give it a go.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for chatting.
No, it was great. Very helpful. And now I got to take all these things I've learned and start moving through the rest of the book with it. So,
well, and it's, it's a process. Like seriously, for somebody who's kind of just kicking off and like working on their first book, that it's fantastic. You're doing a great job. It's really well. Yeah, it's coming together. This scene's great. The stuff I've read in the class that you've put up has been great. It's coming together well.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, man. All right, I'm going to shut that.